All right, welcome to part number 2 of our introduction to Sanskrit, and now we're going to start really studying the basic components of the language, and we're going to start with the vowels. Now, what are vowels actually? The word vowels in English doesn't really explain what it is, and so I like to rely on the meaning of vowels in Arabic or in Hebrew, where it actually explains what the vowels are. In Arabic, vowels are called harf mutaharik, which means, and I apologize for my horrible Arabic pronunciation, this means moving letters. In Hebrew, it's called tnuot, which means movements. Now the question is, what is moving? And what is moving? The answer is air. When we have a vowel, a, e, air is moving out of our body, and that vowel can be short, that vowel can be long. The movement of the air, short or long, but it's not stopping. It gets modulated, it creates a different sound, but it's still a movement of air. And this is in contrast to consonants, which in Arabic are called, I believe, harf sakin, which means residing letters, and in Hebrew it means itzuim, which means stoppages. And again, what is being stopped? What is being stopped is the air. So if we look at a consonant like T, the actual sound of that consonant is T, 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 right? The air gets stopped, G, K, N. And where it gets stopped, we can know based on this diagram that we've seen already of where the sound is produced, the articulation of the sound. So let's look at the vowels of the Sanskrit language. And the first thing to realize, to know about Sanskrit, which actually makes our life so much easier, is that Sanskrit is a phonetic language. And that means that the sounds are produced as they are written. Now, if I showed you these letters in English and I asked you, how do you pronounce these? You would say, okay, this one is called A. Let's start with their names. This one is called A. The next one is called E. The next one is I, O, and U. All right, but how do we pronounce them? And the answer would be, I'm sorry, Tomer, but we pronounce them differently in different letters. I mean, if you say cat, then the A sounds as A. And if you say cake, then the A sounds as A, right? And E is sometimes E, and sometimes it's E, depending on the word. And that's true because English is not a phonetic language. In English, the sounds can change based on, the letters can change based on the word. Sometimes it's based on some rules. Sometimes there are exceptions to the rules. And that makes it so that English is very difficult to pronounce. If you haven't studied English from somebody who spoke English to you, you're probably going to make a lot of mistakes. But with Sanskrit, it's actually quite easy. And the same goes for the transliteration of Sanskrit, the way we write Sanskrit when we use English letters for it. It sounds always the same. The sounds are always the same. By the way, an anecdote before we continue. English is not the only language which is not phonetic. There are many languages which are not phonetic. Some of them are much less phonetic than English. Sometimes I hear people bring up French as an example for a language that there are a lot of letters which are silent, which are not produced, and a lot of letters which sound differently in different names. I don't know French, so I don't know so much if that's true. I have read that the least phonetic language out there is actually ancient Tibetan, where in ancient Tibetan we only pronounce 30% of the written word, which means 70% is just stuff which tells us how to pronounce the other 30%. And that is very non-phonetic. An example of a language which we commonly know which is phonetic is Spanish. Spanish, and that's why Sanskrit is quite easy for Spanish for Spanish speakers to learn. And also Spanish has this aspect that it's easier in this sense, that the sounds are always the same as they are. So let's look at these 5 basic sounds. These 5 basic sounds in Sanskrit and in transliteration in general are always A, E, I, O, U. Wherever you see this letter that we call A, the sound is always going to be A, which makes it really simple because you don't need to know anything anymore. Just you see that letter, it's always going to be A. The letter E is always going to be E. The letter I is always going to be I. The letter O is always O, and the letter U is always U. That's it, as simple as it is. Now, these 5 sounds, they are considered the 5 basic sounds of almost all languages. Like, these are the most common vowels out there, the most common ways of producing different vowels. There are many languages that have many intermediary vowels, something between A and E, something between E and E, something between E and O. Because if you look at it, it's a movement of the air which goes from one area to another. A is produced with the mouth completely open. A. E is produced by kind of almost like smiling and bringing the back of the tongue up. E. E is bringing more the front of the tongue, so the sound moves more to the front of the mouth. E. So the difference between E and E is where the tongue goes up. In both of them, we keep our mouth almost like smiling. And then we have O, which has an open throat and a mouth which is made to a round shape. And finally, U, which has more of a narrowing of the mouth and more of a closing of the mouth. Okay, so these are the 5 basic sounds. So say them together with me: A, E, I, O, U. One more time: A, E, I, O, U. All right. Now, another thing to know about Sanskrit, and this will help us to understand some of the things, is that Sanskrit is a language which is used for singing. And so Sanskrit has within itself a kind of rhythm. So each one of these sounds has a certain beat to it. And we call this beat a matra. Now, this matra is a relative beat because we can sing, this is a beat which is, let's say, it's not exactly, but let's say it's 60 beats per minute. 1, 2, no, this is faster, okay? Doesn't matter how much it is. 1 beat 60 beats per minute would mean 1 beat every second, which would be slower. Whatever this beat is, okay? So we can sing a song in different beats, okay? We can sing it slower or we can sing it faster. When I find myself in times of sorrow, Mother Mary comes to me. Or I can sing it faster. When I find myself in times of sorrow, Mother Mary comes to me. Okay? So in the same way, this matra is a relative unit, but in normal speech, they say that a matra is about 0.4 seconds. So each one of these beats is 0.4 seconds. Okay, so it's a bit more than 120 beats per minute. And so the sounds would be together with a beat. A, E, I, O, U. A, E, I, O, U. Okay, now these would be what we call short vowels, because in Sanskrit we will have vowels which have a short rhythm, like that they are only taking 1 beat of the rhythm, and vowels which take 2 beats of the rhythm. Okay, and so we have these short vowels, A, E, I, O, U, and we'll have long vowels which will be simply 2 beats. A, E, I, O, U. And you can see that I didn't do a long E and a long U. There's a reason for that. But I did do a long A and a long I and a long U. Now, I'm not very good with rhythm, so don't catch me if the rhythm was off. Also, when we start experimenting, when we start learning how to produce these long vowels, it's better that we do a bit longer than is necessary. If we do like 3 beats for that A, it's okay. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to simplify it for you. Don't go like, oh, it needs to be exactly this speed. No, we have a short vowel, A, E, I, O, U, and then we have a longer vowel. Okay, so A, E, I, O, U, U. Okay, and that way we have short and long. Now, in some places where you're going to read these long letters, they're simply going to be written by having this doubling of the letters. So if they wanted you to pronounce a short vowel, they will just write A 1 time. If they wanted you to pronounce a long vowel, they will produce 2 A's. But this is not the type of transliteration that we're going to teach you. The type of transliteration that we're going to use is something which is called IAST, the International Alphabet of the Sanskrit Transliteration. And this is this writing which have marks underneath it or over it, etc. Now, as I said in this class, I'm going to teach you the basics to make it really, really simple. Okay? So for example, as you can see, I'm going to treat this E and this O as short vowels, although actually they're considered to be long vowels, but I said we're making it simple, right? A, E, I, O, U. And then how would we write a long A? Well, the way it's written in transliteration is that we put a line above the letter. So the moment that there is a line above the letter, you know that it is a long vowel. An A with no line is a regular A, one beat, and an A with a line above it is a long A. An I with no line is E, and an I with a long line is E. U, U. Okay? Very simple. So short vowels, long vowels. Line above the letter, always long. And that's always going to be the case. Okay, so let's take a look for a moment at this diagram of all of the vowels within Sanskrit. And as you can see, we have here the A and A, you already know it. If you look at this writing which is over here, you're going to see that this is how the vowel is written when it's independent. But when the vowel is written together with a consonant, this is the consonant pa, P. It's written in a different way. So if you look at the long A, this is how a long A is written when it's alone. But when it's together with the word, it's written like this. But this is actual Sanskrit. Okay, this is Devanagari. And we're not going to study this. We're only going to focus on how it's written here in the Romanized version, which is the transliterated version. And let's look. We said there are 16 vowels, right? So we have A, I, U, U. And then we have this one here, which is an R with a dot underneath. This is a vowel that you will encounter quite a lot. It's weird. How can an R be a vowel? And I'm going to touch on it soon. This is usually pronounced R, and this one would be R. And this one with an L is usually pronounced L, and this one will be L. And there is some controversy about how these are going to be pronounced, and I'm going to talk about them in a moment, but we'll get back to these. So next we have E, and you see that in a sense the long form of E is not E, it's I. And O, the long form of O, is something else, it's A-U. And then we have these two special vowels, this one, and aha. And I'm going to touch them. I wasn't pronouncing them correctly now, it was just to show you. But now let's go into these AI and AU. And these are called diphthongs. Diphthongs is when we have two vowels one after the other. So when we have this A and I one after the other, how would we pronounce that? Well, if we're doing this in a way which is phonetic, A is A and I is E, so this will be Ai. In the same way, A and U would be Au. Okay? We can have diphthongs, we have these in Sanskrit. In other languages, we can even have triphthongs, which means three vowels one after the other, like Aiye, Aiyo. That will be a triphthong, three vowels one after the other. Now, here is an important point about Hindi pronunciation versus Sanskrit pronunciation, because maybe you're going to hear some mantras sung in Hindi or mantras sung in Marathi, and you're going to notice that they pronounce these letters differently. And the reason for that is that Hindi actually doesn't have diphthongs. So the Hindi pronunciation is not the same as the Sanskrit pronunciation. In Hindi, this AI would be A. And this AU would be A. But it's not the Sanskrit pronunciation. If you want to pronounce this correctly according to Sanskrit, this will be Ai and Au. Let's talk about the special vowels. So we have this R with a dot underneath it, and then an R with a dot underneath it with a line above. Now I said that every time that there's a line above something, it means that it's longer. So actually, if you know how to pronounce this R with a dot underneath, you know how to pronounce the R with the line above. And this R with a dot underneath is a kind of rolling of the tongue inside of the throat. Okay? And this is considered a vowel in Sanskrit. Now there's two ways that you're going to hear it pronounced. There is ri and there is ru. Both are considered correct. It's not so clear which one is coming from where. Ri is definitely the Paninian Sanskrit version. Ru is not clear if that is a Hindi pronunciation, a Marathi pronunciation, or maybe it's a Vedic pronunciation. Remember I said there before Sanskrit was systematized, there was an older version of it, and it's possible that they used this Ru. I'm not so clear about that. If you are able to clarify, that would be amazing. Because we know that in this Vedic Sanskrit, sometimes there was more U sound. Like for example, we say swaha or svaha, but in Vedic Sanskrit, we know it was suwaha. So they had more of these U sounds, and it's possible that this pronunciation ru is coming from there. And this rolling of the tongue happens like in the middle of the mouth, you know, in the palate. And the next letter, which is this ru, this ori, like Rishikesh or Rishi, is a sound that we actually encounter quite a lot in Sanskrit, and you'll see a lot of mantras with it. So it's very important to learn this ri. The L, which is, the letter is called ri, but most pronunciation of it, and I say most because people tend to argue about how it should be pronounced, but most pronunciation that I've encountered and learned from various sources, they seem to agree more on L, which is the same idea as this R, but it's coming from the tongue in the back of the throat, okay? So, ri, the tongue bounces inside of the mouth, and it's coming from the throat itself. So it's r and l. Whether it rolls or it doesn't roll, that doesn't matter. So if you pronounce it l, or if you pronounce it l, as you can see, quite difficult. I assume that all of these are acceptable. And even if you pronounce it lri, is also a way that people who speak Sanskrit produce it in this way. All of these are accurate enough. This is a very rare letter. You're almost never going to encounter it, only in some very esoteric mantras. But the ri, this R with a dot underneath, remember that one. The L, if you pronounce it just L, is fine. So we have R, and we have Ri, we have L, and we have L, which is a bit of a longer L. And now we move to the final two special vowels that we have, which are called Anusvara and Visarga. Anusvara, also known as Bindu. This is when we have this M, which has a dot underneath it. And we find this letter happening in a lot of mantras. In Sanskrit, you'll see that this is made as a dot above the letter. And what it denotes is it's not an M. What it means is a nasalization of the sound. So these vowels, while most vowels have to do with pronouncing the sound through the mouth, this vowel has to do with pronouncing the sound through the nose. So wherever you see bindu, it's not say, it doesn't mean say M. What it means is simply close your mouth and let the air go through the nose. So if we have the sound la, which is this word which is written there, and we add a bindu to it, and in Sanskrit transliteration you're going to see an M with a dot underneath it, then the sound la, we simply keep on saying the la and close the mouth. So it'll be lam, lam. So it starts with something which sounds like and then turns more into a kind of N sound, which comes from the nose. Lam, vam, ram. Now, it's accurate enough if you just close the mouth. So you don't need to push it into the nose. It's good that you know if you can't do that, but otherwise, simply if you see an M with a dot underneath it, know that it's just a silent M where the mouth gets closed. Lam, ram. Now, when bindu appears at the end of a word, like for example in the case of lam, it does indeed sound a little bit more like the English M. But this is not really the case when we find bindu in the middle of the word. Now, it's quite complicated and I do want to simplify it. So I would say that as a general rule, when you see bindu at the end of the word, in most cases it's going to be more like an M sound, lam. And when you see bindu in the middle of a word, it will sound more like the English N. So the following word, which is written S-A bindu S-K-A-R-A, will be pronounced sanskara, sanskara. So the sound goes into the nose, and this time, because it's in the middle of a word, it will make the sound N. The same goes for Sanskrit. Sanskrit. It's written with a bindu, but it sounds like an N because it's in the middle of a word. Okay? All right, on to the last of the weird vowels, which is the visarga. The visarga in Sanskrit, you're going to see it as two dots written to the side of the word. And in the transliteration, you're going to see it as an H which has a dot underneath it. And this is a little bit of a weird one to understand. This visarga is a pushing of the air. And there's two ways of pushing the air in Sanskrit. You're going to see there's something called aspiration when it comes to the consonants, which is kind of putting an H there, and we'll touch it in the next part of the class. But for our purposes, this visarga is a pushing of the air out. Now, the pushing of the air, it takes the sound of whatever was before it. So if we take this word, which is called the word shanti, it ends with a T with an I. So it ends with a TI, which is T, shanti. And after that, there is this H with a dot underneath. And what that kind of means is it means just echo that sound, that vowel that was before. And that vowel was E. Okay, I'm going to use the sound. I'm no longer going to use the English names for these vowels. So the sound was E. So shanti, he. Okay, and this is not like an H, a he. No, it's kind of like the sound disappears. Shanti, he. Shanti, he. Okay? Now it always is going to take the sound of what was before. So if we take a look at the next word, nama, and then this H, the sound before the H is A. So it will be namaha, namaha. Okay, it's not namaha, it's namaha. There is an A sound there, but it's more of an echo, it's more of a flowing. Now when you read mantras, you'll see that in some mantras, you will have it end with shanti, shanti. And only on the third one, you're going to hear this shanti. And the reason is that when it comes in the middle of a sentence, we usually don't pronounce this. Okay? In the namaha we do, in the shantis we don't. When it's a repetition of one after the other of words, we usually drop the pronunciation and only bring it to the last one. Shanti, 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 he, because it's an echo, and the echo only happens at the end of sentences. Okay? So let's sum up all of our vowels. We have the short vowels, a, e, I, o, u. We have the long vowels, where when we see any of these vowels with a line above them, it's going to be a long vowels, a, I, u. Then we have these diphthongs, ai, au. Then we have the special vowels, ri, ri, l, and Okay? So these are the 16 vowels of Sanskrit. Remember the main ones to remember. A line above makes it long. Ri, and this H, and this M. These are the ones that you should remember. The li, have it in the back of your mind. You may encounter it at some points. Okay. So to conclude this part of the class, let's go over all of the vowels together. I'll pronounce them twice. One time you can listen, and the second time you can repeat together with me. A, 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 I, 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 U, 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 R, 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 R,
li, e, ai, o, au, aha, a, i, u, r, l, e, ai, o, au, aha.
Okay, so these are the 16 vowels, and in the next section we're going to study the consonants.